The next person we have coming up to speak is Jaya Moorthi. And Jaya, if you're here, he's Director of Logistics. He's been 19 years in supply chain and logistics. As I looked over his profile, it seems like he's been in every aspect of supply chain, which is fantastic. And also he's a graduate of National University of Singapore. Looking forward to your presentation on new trends. So please welcome Jaya to the stage.
Anyway, let me get the ball rolling. So welcome everybody for today's session. Let me start off with a slide. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Anyway, I'm not going to introduce myself so much because you can see my profile in the book. So let me get down to the real details. I got about 20 slides to share, and I got about 25 minutes to go, right? Let me start off with the slide. I really like this slide a lot because, I mean, if you look at the slide, you see the symbol of our country, and then you'll see the pride, right? Pride of our country in the Malayan. And interesting behind, you see the durian, you see the haze, and then you see our new symbol, which is a casino of our country, right? Gambling, and you also see a failure of a defunct wheel that no more exists, right? So good and bad in this slide, right? So anyway, I hope I've woken up all of you guys. Let me go to the agenda specific. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about trends. Before I start off, let me start off with HP a bit, facts about HP. And I will talk a bit about what's the framework. I just flip it up from textbook, it's no big deal. Framework of analyzing trends. I'll talk about the 4 dimensions. Again, this is from textbook, nothing much. But really, I will go on to talk about how I perceive trends with the available literature outside and the implication and how we're going to go about dealing with it. And it's not so much of what HP is doing, it's how you look at it, what are the techniques you want to deploy to look at trends, and how you're going to manage it, right? So not so much of what HP does for each of these trends and how do you manage it. That's not the intent of my conversation. And lastly, I'm going to touch about manufacturing trends. And of course, big data, Keith touched a bit on it. It took some thunder away from my slide, but I'll just go on what I have. Let me talk about HP, right? So I think Rajesh was talking about 175 years of P&G. So 75 still is pretty big to me. It's a huge, right? And to be part of this company with 75 years and I'm in maybe the tail end of the company, that's interesting, right? So let me just move on. And today, HP, we like to think that we have a very large industry profile in terms of product profile, right? So we have infrastructure, a huge server community. We have software, and we have services and solutions. So when we look at this, the point we're trying to bring across, we like to believe that we are the only company that has the widest profile of all these various elements as opposed to our competitive landscape. So this is the pride of the company to continue to go on to build on all these 4 limbs. And today, again, like I said, we have a broad portfolio of products ranging from software, hardware, spares. So we have the whole spectrum of activity that today we have in the technology part of our vocation. And we look at the industry, we also believe that we have a much expensive scope compared to many of our competitors. And lastly, in terms of solution and services. So what all this boils down to actually is to making a positive impact around the world, right? Every time I say this statement, it makes me feel good. It sounds like a politician, you know. But really the intent of this in the company, I mean the moral compass of the company is to do good in many of these limbs, whether it's education, environment, healthcare, or community, right? So every element of this is part of HP's goal today. Some facts that actually I myself didn't know until I did the slides about a few months. These are pretty old slides. I'm not sure whether how many of you have seen this before, but really we do, every 60 seconds, we do 4 servers, right? We deliver 120 PCs, and we deliver 100 printers. That's awesome, right? Even every time I look at this slide, no matter how many times I see this slide, I always pause again and think, is it true? But that's awesome, right? And that's where HP, we pride ourselves of having a industry, a supply chain that is complex, large, and still working like a machine to deliver with this kind of velocity into the global supply chain, right? And again, some more statistics to amplify the fact that we are a pretty large company, right? We have more than 600 suppliers. We have more than 60 billion total spend. That's huge. It is equivalent to some of the countries, for the matter. And then you move on in terms of distribution nodes, manufacturing sites, 136 sites, and these are pretty old. Some of them have changed now, but interestingly, the numbers are fairly large. So to manage such a supply chain with multiple source points, manufacturing points, and suppliers, and distribution nodes, and the front-end channel or direct partners that you have, which are kind of size and complexity across the global chain, is a humongous, really a humongous task. And in Asia Pacific, to be and myself as well as my team to be part of this enormous rise is it's a cherishing experience, honestly, over the last 10 over years with HP, right? So I'm going to go into more nuts and bolts, right? So when I saw Rajesh's slide, I was humbled. He has fantastic slides, good video. I'm not going to share any video. I'm not going to share much of a pictures kind of slide. The reason because it's trends, right? And when we talk about trends, what are we talking about, right? We're talking about change. And how do we define change? Is it a change that when you put a frog into, you know, the example of putting a frog into the burner, as it warms up, the frog finds itself is dead? Are you talking about a slow change? Or are you talking about a change that comes in the fashion of a tsunami? It hits you and then you have to react to it, right? So what are we talking about? Trends. Trends are a very tricky thing. If you read along trends, it's like the best metaphor is actually the ocean, the waves. 100 miles away, you'll see a small wave that's gathering up, right? Over time, the wave gains momentum. It builds and it becomes a much larger wave by the time it hits the shores. The question is, how do you spot the correct smaller waves, if I use the word? How do you spot it? How do you react to it? And how do you recognize which is important and which is not important? And by the time it comes to your reasonable level of response, where are you? So the best metaphor for me in terms of trends is giving this example, right? And when you talk about this, then the next question is, obviously, what's the implication for you? Supply chain implication, right? And how are you going to mitigate? As far as mitigation is concerned, or whether you manage it, it all depends on each individual company, the maturity of industry, maturity of a company, maturity of a workforce, maturity of every business process that you have in a company to manage such a change. So today, when I go through all of this, I'm going to touch quite a bit on micro trends, not all of them, but some of them. I'm going to talk about some on implication, and I'm going to throw whatever I read in my own literature, in my own environmental scanning. I'm going to put my ideas, which is going to be relatively controversial, right? I like to be controversial. That's my style. So I'm assuming a lot of you won't agree with some of them, and that's what I hope to get away with today. Some guys will think about it and say, no, Jaya, it doesn't make sense. And some will say, yes, it makes sense. And some will say, Jaya, make sure you don't come next seminar, right? It doesn't matter, right? So my intent here is to go through the thought process of going through each of these conversations, right? Again, like I said, this is textbook stuff. When you talk about trends, you can put them in any kind of profile you want, any kind of structure, population, physical environment, political, economic, and so on, right? So let me just move on. And then you talk about implication, you can divide them into logistics, production, sourcing, procurement, and of course, demand and planning. There are many ways to put implication. I use something that's right off on a textbook, no big deal, right? You can frame up in whichever way you feel necessary for your company or your industry. And we talk about mitigation. The best way to look at mitigation is, at least from a supply and demand side. So the best way to look at, one way to look at this is that, let me give you an industry that today all of you are familiar with, Singapore, right? So you look at today's property market in Singapore, right? You see there's a surge of prices, there's a tension in the community, the tension in the environment. So how does the government manage it? The government manages it using supply-side economics, releasing land to reduce the prices. At some time, you move to the demand side to manage the demand of the property prices. Same like trends. When you see the implication, there are times that you manage through your supply side, and there are times you have to go in and manage your demand. The managing the demand side is perhaps the most challenging part. Because how do you manage consumer? How do you manage customer? It's totally uncontrollable, right? So in terms of looking at this, you look through a supply and demand side and how to manage it. That's the technique, that's the trick behind it. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying as it is, all right? Let me move on. Let me touch the most easiest one, and some of these topics have been touched by the previous, I think, Rajesh and Keith. So it gives me at ease, actually. So there are three parts to it. Growth. And it's pretty simple. I think Rajesh covered to a certain extent. 7 billion, you're going to grow to easily 9 or 10 billion very soon. And you look at the profile of the global growth population growing up. It's huge. I'll go to more statistics later on to give you a feel of it. But more important in this population growth, what is most important to me actually is the migration. So what do I mean by migration? Today we see global citizens in many metro countries. And I'll touch on the major metro countries in metro cities in major countries. And these global citizens are the ones who drive demand today. So you have a cosmopolitan place in Shanghai, in Dubai, in Jakarta. They drive a different kind of demand than compared to the homogeneous market that we know of. So the rise of global citizens has changed quite a bit, right? And you look at China, the rural to the east, right? I mean, this is a topic that I think many of you know about, so I'm not going to say much. But when I read this, a very interesting fact came to my reading was that during the holiday season in China, as far as I read, it seems about 120 million move during the entire holiday season. So when I read it, my eyes nearly popped out. 120 million during the holiday season is like a country moving within a country. That's huge. Imagine the implication on demand, imagine the implication on transport and so on. So the movement of migration, short-term or long-term, is an interesting element to watch for. McKinsey says 60% of the population of 440 cities will deliver half of the world GDP. Now, where are these 440 cities in the world? Where are they in Asia Pacific? And how are we managing it? How are you prepared for it? That's the trick behind it, right? And I think we need to look at these cities, in what fashion are they growing, where are they growing, and how do you reach out to the customers? Urbanization is a big phenomenon in the whole world. It's growing at a rapid rate. It used to be about 30, 40. I was watching this quite closely, and it's envisaged that it will go up to 80 very soon. And that is huge. Urbanization basically means metro cities will pump out population of more than 10 million at any time. That's huge. In terms of delivery execution, you can imagine. So where are the metro? And these are the guys who have money. So I'll come to the part on the money, because this, like you said, right, the demand goes where the money goes. And I'll talk about mega cities. So in the GDP, there's about 20 cities that's forecast over more than 1.2 trillion. That's a huge in terms of GDP. Population-wise, can you imagine this is like having another Myanmar or Vietnam, just on the cities alone. So the reason why I put this forward is to give us some facts and feeling that, guys, the key things are moving faster than we think of. Are we well placed to manage some of this? Because typically from a supply chain perspective, what happens is that the marketeers at the front end do a lot of this stuff. And when they start to feel that something needs to be done, we have to go direct to a certain country, we have to deliver in this fashion, they turn around and look at supply chain guys like us and say, guys, are you ready? And you say, what do you mean, are you ready? Right? So the trend setting and trend environmental scanning is a joint process of the entire company. It's not just the front end, the sales, the analytical guys, but it's a joint process across the entire company. That's my message to us. And how do we convince everybody in our organization to be working in tandem, working in sync? That's a huge challenge. And this is some of the statistics I talk of, right? So you look at urban growth in China alone, and this is something I took it from McKinsey. So you look at the cities in China, right? The top few cities, like I say, is 1.6 trillion by 2016. It's equivalent of creating another South Korea, just the cities alone. That's huge, right? I've been using the word huge for too often now, but I can't find another word, so just bear with me. And the population is also quite huge. It's about 152 million, and it's just like it's above Russia, within cities. And if you look at the top cities that we have, these are where your demand is going to flow. This is where the money is. And how are we placed to manage this complex set of customers? And I'm talking about population growth. I'm not talking about the type of demand they want, heterogeneous demand, right? I'm not talking about the complexity of segmentation within the particular city. I haven't come to that, right? So just on the onset, when you look at this, you know the kind of challenges that we're going to face in the future, or are facing already. Let's talk about cities outside China. So Delhi, Mumbai, Moscow, Jakarta, and so on, right? So the 20 cities, 1.2 trillion. And if you talk about, like I said, this mentioned that it's also McKinsey. It's like creating another Indonesia. The population is, of the top few cities, is about 187. So like the 6th biggest country today we have in the world. And these statistics just tells you how much are we prepared for these countries in terms from a supply chain perspective. Because like everyone said, the growth is in Asia. But where exactly is the growth? In what areas are the growth? In what kind of segments are the growth is? From a high-tech, whether it's high-tech or anything else in any other segment, this is the next level of conversation that we go through. And that is what, at least in HP, we are trying to figure out. Right? And these are something that you really have to work with all the partners we have, whether the yellow, the brown, or the greens. Right? Okay, so what's the implication? Like I said many times, how do you serve the urban concentration. Retail management going to change quite a bit. From retail management, what do I mean is that for a sales guy in the country, the channel map of the country will change enormously. Previously, maybe the way he delivers is maybe through a couple of channel partners. With the growth of online, with the growth of spread of population, the channel map in the country will change. When the channel map in the country changes, when I say channel map, I'm talking about first tier, second tier, and so on, right? When those change, the implication to logistics is the way you deliver, whichever partner you're working with, it will have tremendous implication, right? And I'm only talking about the forward, right? There's also a reverse flow to it. And then, of course, I can go on talking about the population diversification, the ecosystem that comes out of it, and as well as infrastructure constraint. So what's the mitigation? So this is where I took some of my ideas. So this is where it's fairly controversial, right? I think as time goes by, flex work supply chain will also come back again. Will resurface its head of combined industries, combined transportation, and so on and so forth. I use the example of ocean spray. This was a study done by, if I'm not mistaken, CIT and Stanford. They did a study of ocean spray where they demoed, and I think you should pick it up. Google up ocean spray. You'll find how they have worked with competitors to do forward and backward backhaul, and they have reduced emission of gas, I think about 30%. So it's a new way of working that I think we will start to evolve to. And there's going to be a tremendous pressure on decentralized work. When I say decentralized, that means how do you manage your nodes? How do you have multiple crossdock to do efficiency and velocity to deliver your customers? How do you do responsiveness versus efficiency? In our today's world, we have responsive and efficiency, right? And you know, most of the time, all of us guys are asked, how do you reduce costs? How do you reduce efficiency? Pull the cost as much, cut as much as headcount you want. But every time you make the efficiency go too much, the ability to be responsiveness is a trade-off. One of the toughest aspects of critical redundancy is not internalized by many. There need to be redundancy at the correct place in the supply chain to manage business agility. And that is a big, difficult challenge. How do you actually put it in the supply chain and where, right? Shaping demand. I think we're going to come to a stage where shaping demand is going to resurface its head. We all know about CPFR. There's also going to be a time, I believe, and I read literature to say that we're going to time when maybe you sell what you have. This is where the shaping of demand comes. There are competitors, even in the high-tech industry, have done it. They change, when they don't have the product to sell, they multiply, they rebundle again and sell back. Sell what you have. That's all to it, right? I think this will resurface in a different fashion as the complexity becomes much, much more challenging, right? So these are things that I just want to share with you my thoughts, nothing right or wrong, but trigger that in your individual industries, this may come in a different fashion, in a different form of fashion. Let me move on to something more economic factors, right? So I talk about, this is one of my favorites, the rise of middle class. The rise of middle class actually is the tremendous engine of any supply chain anywhere else. These are the key triggering point that will drive the energy of the country. And we look at, I took some examples out of Asia, Brazil. Brazil was very interesting because Brazil is a hotspot now, right? And if you look at the statistics there, 95 million, the 31% growth just from 1999 to 2009. And this group of people have 46%, nearly half of the national purchasing power, and they own 70% of the credit cards. If these are the guys, you know where these are the guys you market, these are the guys you segment, these are the guys you manage with. Because that's going to drive your business. Right? If you look at Asia Pacific, I gave you an example of the GDP growth. I think you guys have known it, so I'm not going to repeat it. Look at Pakistan, something more closer. I chose Pakistan, not Indonesia or Myanmar or Vietnam, simply because Pakistan is something that maybe some of us, at least some of us may not have put in on a radar screen. So in Pakistan, the age is young. Young age makes a difference to any population. That's the reason why China grew very fast. The youth drive the employment. You had factories there. The youth drive the purchasing power. You had luxury brands. China today has luxury volume of 15% of the total luxury market in the whole world. That's huge, right? This, I think, can somebody come for me how many times I use the word huge? Maybe I'll set some new record. Anyway, so, and Africa. So I'm not going to go much into Africa, but I've seen Nigeria in action, how the country is, because of the spend, they have now revenue, and how they are managing the supply chain in Nigeria. So that was an eye-opener. The same eye-opener is going to happen in Pakistan, right? So, and if you look at us, ask ourselves whether it's healthcare, whether it's the kind of industry P&G is or high-tech, are we well placed in Pakistan? How do we reach out to Pakistan anyway, right? These are things that you start to prepare early. And I'm talking only about physical supply chain, right? I haven't talked about government affairs, global trade. How do you manage the government? How do you manage customs and all that stuff? So early trending, early strategic planning, environmental strategic scanning is extremely important in our world today. if we don't do it effectively, it's to our peril. That's my message. Let me move on. What can I say about this slide? I think most of you have seen it, right? You look at the slide, this is basically about internet usage. And I think all of you guys know. It's not unknown to you guys, whether penetration in Asia, which are the top internet countries that, are using internet. What does this slide all tell us? I don't know what it tells to you guys, but to me, it's a new form of human expression. A new form of human energy that is out there that is untapped and is ungoverned. Governments are trying to figure out how to manage this, right? This is a new form of multi-channel that we have to manage. That's what this means. And next few slides, I'll talk about more about other aspects of internet, other aspects of social media that now become a channel. So I read in some article, I think it's L'Oreal, if I'm not mistaken, Rajesh maybe can help me. They did a model where consumers, as they drive along in the taxi, they see a particular product, they see either in the advert in the taxi or in the bus, they pick up the mobile, they will key in, they will lock in the product will then be delivered to them the next day. When I read, I'm simplifying the whole chain, but when I read this whole article, it pointed to me another famous guy, Amazon, right? The velocity of supply chain to be able to pick a micro product and to deliver the customer satisfaction, whether the next day or whatever timeline. That is the kind of velocity of business that we're going to be in. And how much of this business is going to grow and cannibalize the traditional channel inventory, channel way of doing work. That's another conversation altogether, right? And the reason why I think one of the points I want to make across is that to learn to grow ourselves, I think we have to look at all the other industry. So I do not want to talk about high-tech, I want to talk about all the other industry to learn how things have moved and to learn how we apply to us. Because we learn a lot from other industries. And that's where I'm getting my feeler, so to speak. So what's the implication? So there's a lot of words there. I'm not going to go through all of them, in interest of time. So I think online selling would be mandatory, right? And the reason why I put Myanmar at test case because as I was reading, people are questioning Myanmar today, the channel inventory, the first tier, second tier, the kind of retail partners that you see giants and you see most retailers in Singapore, they are not found in Myanmar yet, right? In the traditional market, we grow by using normal retailers, first tier, second tier, then slowly mature to online and so on. In Myanmar, the belief by experts is that they might even jumpstart the whole thing. They might go even to online direct from day one. So it's going to be a very hybrid from day one. That means you're not going to have the traditional growth pattern. So just a simple discussion of this, and I'm not going to go too much into detail, tells you that your hybrid model that you have to manage Myanmar is going to be very different from what we have today, right? So of course, homogeneous. I'm going to skip that. Early commoditization and global consumerism. People are getting smarter, right? And they will reject products that's not good. They will have litigation. The way Singapore, after more than 20 years, we have our legal act and consumer act and so on. So this will change across many countries. If you look at the environmental perspective, WEEE has gone into many countries and it's become legislated, right? So I can go on and give you more legislation aspect, but I think the message is very clear. Production, where to manufacture, a very hot topic. I'm going to touch on it a bit later, but AMR research shows that they did a survey with senior executives. 56%, more than half, believe that offshoring, end of the day, increased prices. And why do you think they said that? They say this because when markets start to fragment and polarize, doing central location and deliver mix and mix is may not be relevant. You may have to move to a decentralized to deliver. And that's why they feel offshore becoming more challenging. Of course, there are many other factors. I don't want to simplify it. But this gives you an indication how to look at trends and how to understand their implications. And you talk about, of course, small and 3D. 3D printing is very interesting. I think 3D printing, I'm not sure how many of you guys get a chance to understand this better, but 3D printing, which HP is a part of it, of course, 3D printing together with the technology is going to revolutionize the entire manufacturing industry. You're going to do micro manufacturing at distributed points, right? And today, I got a wedding card from India, right? India, and it was a 3D printed card at this age, and it's from India. The technology is spreading quite fast and furious. They even, I think it's NUS, started to build on 3D. I can't remember the exact facts, but they did toolbox of people's faces with a 3D image for manufacturing. So the 3D is going to revolutionize the way manufacturing is looked at in the future, in terms of prototypes and so on and so forth, right? What do I have? Distribution. I use ASRS as an example. If you remember ASRS many years ago, the reason why ASRS came out was because of mass. You take 10 lots, you deliver out, right? ASRS died. The flowers are growing on the cemetery now, right? The reason because it doesn't make sense in today's world. That's the kind of technology today we see is outpace ourselves. And then if you look at last mile operation return management, I'm not going to elaborate much, but you know all these are going to be very much implicated by what I've said so far. Transport logistics, urbanization. Just let me do a check on time. Okay. Growth of urbanization is going to be huge, right? And you look at the countries that are populated, congestion of deliver to our customers is going to be extremely difficult. You look India is the best example to talk of. 1 billion over people, about 350 people per square kilometers, and 10% of fatal incidents happening with 1% of ownership of cars, right? Of the world population. So you see the lopsidedness. And this just give you, and ADB estimates 4% at least, 2 to 4% of GDP is eroded by this. And if you took the examples of the last 5 years of port congestion in Australia affecting supplies, increasing prices at the end of the day, you know infrastructure constraints is going to be huge. Air traffic, similar, right? Let me move on very quickly. Next one, public-private enterprise. I believe public-private enterprise will change quite a bit. And the reason why I put some examples there of Vietnam and India is to give you how public and private enterprise will drive some of these investments in the future, right? And I'll talk about the implication to us later on. How do you want to play yourself in this environment? And how do you watch for these trends to manage some of these trends? The last one I brought up is just for fun facts. It's not much of a trend or implication, but interestingly, when I was doing my literature research and trying to read more, I understand that it'd be interesting to note that the ratio of 3PL to a GDP versus the 3PL share in the market, the more mature the market, you tend to see that 3PLs are more dominant in the countries, and vice versa. This is a very good reflection of how mature the market is. This is something that I just brought up. I thought it's good to share with you guys to have a feel of how the market is. So you look at, interestingly, countries like India and China, 3PL share of the wallet is very small, right? And you look at the cost of GDP from a logistic perspective, it's fairly high compared to the mature countries. These are important statistics when you talk to guys like EDB and so on. Where do we stand in this whole equation? How do we modernize our industry? How do we modernize our infrastructure? This is the kind of conversation you have with the countries like Indonesia. You can make a lot of lobbying efforts with this, and trust me, you can, because they like to see some of this, and this makes a difference in lobbying, right? Implications. Of course, delays. Drivers with strategic resource. And we see Singapore MRT situation, you saw, right, how a driving community, a few guys can make a tremendous difference to the entire transport chain. Drivers will be a strategic resource in the future. How do we manage it? Right? Do you get one driver to drive more? Do you have, so twin driving in long hauls is going to be a very difficult cost element for us, especially talk about Asia Road Network from north to south. There may be a birth of private fleet to have better control. Many people believe PPE, private enterprise, will have unfair competition, which means if, let's say in Chennai, hypothetically, if it's controlled more by a particular customer or particular enterprise, it may limit competition within the entry point itself, right? So public-private enterprise is something to watch for because it can be opposed as a competition as well as a assistance to penetration. Depends how you look at it. Of course, multimodal exploration. There's a new topic about traffic science. This is a new science behind it, on how to route flow of traffic around. There's a study being done by Stanford as well as Harvard on this. What does traffic science mean? So you should Google it up and you'll find a lot of reading behind traffic science. I think it's going to change the way we look at traffic. It's like, if I give another example, you look at PSA. I came from PSA, right? And when the ship docks, once upon a time there was 5 transtainers, 5 tow heads attached to the crane. Over the last week, I think maybe 15 over years, nothing belongs to the crane. Everything moves on a mobile mode. First come, first serve, you pick it up. You pick which is important and which is not important. So if you're not important, you're probably waiting behind. It's like mobile phone electronic, right? When you make a call, if the data packets that go, it goes on which is the most efficient route. The electronical part of the logistics will be very different. It will act like electronically. That's what I'm saying. This is going to be a huge change in the future. That's my thoughts. Off-peak delivery, you can see it. Bundle delivery for entire city. This idea, I was talking to someone in China when one of my visits. I told them potentially there'll be a bundle delivery because of congestion. Interestingly, in my last 2 months, more than a month of visit, I met somebody. There's a state in China, they have, I'm not going to mention which state, there's a state in China, they've appointed only 3 guys, 3 partners to be the sole delivery for a sector, an element of the products. Guess why they did that? It's because of congestion. So you look at it from Singapore environment, just to be close to our hearts, what does it take for our town council to say, guys, for all the local consumer delivery, you're the only guy that deliver into the town council, not everybody else. I don't want 10 guys from bread to everybody else going in. You think we will not come to that state? I think we might. If congestion proves to be this might be a most practical model. So bundle delivery across multiple product profiles, across different groups. So the guy who delivers for me might be doing a combined delivery with what maybe Rajesh has. And this way points back to my earlier conversation of combined transportation. The whole network might change, right? Let me just move on. I was signaled that I'm a bit too slow. I talk too much. Geopolitical. So this whole slide about free trade is huge, right? And it's going to make a lot of change to how the way we function. There's a rise of bilateral trades. Please watch out for it because it's going to make a lot of difference to your entry to your markets. I'm going to speed out a bit. And interestingly, what I'm going to try to say here is that China has changed the whole market industry. The renminbi has went up. The wages have went up. Youth population has dropped. And you see the number of young people that are around in China. That has forced a reinvention of US potentially. And they look at US as a natural gas, the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. Why? Because a lot of industry are going back. Energy profile, a source of energy is coming back in US. And is it possible that other countries, so you look at the statistics in Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on, Thailand, the amount of investment that returning back compared to the few years ago has come back again. So the whole chain of manufacturing or where build strategy that you have, whether it's China is a given place, the world factory might potentially change. Big data, I'm going to skip very fast because Keith covered a lot of it. This is just a lot of jargon, a lot of facts for you to wake up, basically, to understand what big data is. So size and speed matters. You look at the amount of storage and the computation capacity that's grown in the industry is tremendous, right? And how data is found. Data is not what you find in Excel spreadsheet or what. It's found in video, image, audio, and text. All this put together is what big data is, and plus all the social media that you have. And lastly, the value and implications. So for value implication, when big data is concerned, I think today a lot of us are playing where operational efficiency is concerned, right? You try to get as much of reduced cost and see what you can do better with the analytics that you have. But moving forward, what's going to be crucial is how do you grow revenue with analytics? How do you empower blue ocean strategies with that? Because analytics will give you areas that you did not look before, give you new markets to grow revenue, new areas to be more efficient. That's what big data is about. And I want to leave you guys with four bullet points that I thought is important. How to manage data assets, whether it's public or proprietary, how to do a data-driven industry, how do you get a value creation kind of organization, and lastly, how to build the most important, an information strategy organization. These are the 4 big implications to big data in the future, right? So I would apologize a bit, I rushed through my last few slides, but I hope the message is across of trends and how do you manage it, the top process of each of us within the organization to manage this huge wave that's coming to us. That's it, guys. I don't think I have time for, thanks. I don't think I have time for questions, but if anybody want to catch up for any kind of discussion over milk and coffee and biscuits, by all means, you're welcome. Keith? Sorry, I took too long.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sure. Let's give him another round of applause for a great presentation.